Yeah, so I'm Scott Moore. I'm a co-founder of Gitcoin, which is a digital community, an internet-native community for building and funding digital public goods. So shared infrastructure that we all rely on, including things beyond just technology, right? Because I think people often forget that we rely on, the climate. We rely on our health. We rely on things that are beyond just the tools that we're using. We started with the idea of focusing on open source software and Web3 and building the infrastructure for that sort of space. But I hope that eventually we can just build coordination tools that help solve some of these problems that we just haven't seen other institutions take on for the last sort of, even realistically 100, 200 years in an effective way, partly because the technology just wasn't there yet.
What has been so far your favorite moment with Gitcoin?
I think for me, it was probably to some degree launching the DAO. And I think it's because when we think about building, effectively democratic tools, one of the kind of core ways that we coordinate around these problems with Gitcoin is via something called quadratic funding. Quadratic funding is a way to basically build consensus and build sort of a preference map of what a given community cares about in a given sort of period of time. So having the ability to kind of see at a given moment what people care about and fund things according to those preferences is great, but we need to do that in sort of Conway's law, in that principle of building the tooling in the same way that we are trying to, as the tooling is trying to solve the problem. And so, in this sort of way, quadratic funding is itself a very democratic tool. It's trying to build preferences bottoms up from community consensus. And I think with the DAO, we kind of realized that we could actually build the sort of machine that builds the machine in the same way, with sort of principles of traditional democracy and having that be part of the system that we're actually designing. So for me, that was a really hopeful moment. Certainly I would say launching a DAO is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of things that come with that I think we're just sort of starting to learn. But after probably about 6 months, 12 months of that progressing, I think it's made a lot of progress and it's been a really positive experience. I think that the biggest problem with DAOs, which is very solvable, is that you do need to be willing to make some kind of structure. So there's two parts of any organization. You can think of squads as kind of the original kind of community, just you have your local group, you have your group chat, for example, today, very well aligned, everyone knows each other, everyone's very empathetic towards each other, but as you scale, it's very difficult to scale that. When you have 10,000 people, 100,000 people, having that shared alignment can be challenging. So it's one sort of one piece of what I think we've learned is that having a shared narrative and kind of world building around a common mission, in our case funding sort of these digital public goods, I think is really important, and a lot of DAOs I think fail by not being able to align people around those missions.
So you know that the conference theme is Solarpunk, which is a movement that envisions a green, sustainable, optimistic future. I want to know what is it that excites you personally the most about the future?
I think for me, there's a lot of optimism in what we're building with Web3. I think it's very easy to be cynical, especially in the face of a lot of what's happening in the world. Web3 actually gives us some kind of escape route into a way to make collective decisions that is more decentralized, that takes us away from some of the risks that we see with existing tooling and systems that we're sort of stuck within. And I think that to me is very hopeful. So I started my career sort of in the traditional financial world, and I saw a lot of nepotism, certainly a lot of greed, a lot of bureaucracy. David Graeber talks a lot about the sort of I don't know, it's almost a banal evil. It's not really even actually intentionally bad. It just is the way it is, and it tends towards bad outcomes. And I think for me, the end goal of sort of my work in Web3 sort of started in 2016, probably even maybe 2015, when I was sort of thinking about how to just escape that. To me, the inspiring part is that it has actually reached such a scale, because there was no guarantee of that happening. That's I guess a roundabout way to say I think the community is probably the most inspiring, and I think the community is the most inspiring because everyone is taking a bit of a leap of faith on this sort of idea that we may live in this sort of absurdist post-truth world where like we have all these sorts of massive institutional failures and other major problems, but that we actually could still be more optimistic, less cynical, and like actually work towards solving these problems.
Awesome, thank you. Lastly, can you tell us where people can learn more about you and Gitcoin?
Yeah, so for me, Not Scott Moore is my Twitter. I don't know why I chose that handle. It's like just another thing that's kind of stuck. And then for Gitcoin, I would say actually gov.gitcoin.co is the actual governance forum. If you want to get involved in the DAO, that's like the best place to go. There's also probably a few good books that I would recommend, which have been the Green Pill book, and then Impact DAOs, which is a book by Ale Borda principally. Those books to me are kind of good guiding lights of the ethos that we're trying to push forward, and I think would be probably good places for people to kind of get a sense of where we're trying to go.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.